Welcome back to another episode of ROC Boys Football. The fellas heading out to the Pac 12 after dark ish, 7 p.m. kickoff as the Washington Huskies go on the road and play the Oregon Ducks. If you guys are listeners, you know how high I am on this Oregon team. The national media, pretty much everybody, the odds makers, they just wrote Oregon off after a brutal loss to Georgia. Well, guess what? Georgia's been doing that to everybody. And I'm not totally sure if you play that game again, you might see a little different Oregon team because after that loss, they've been on an absolute warpath, pretty much blowing out every team they have played. They're looking like one of the best teams in the country and certainly in the Pac 12. But they play a Washington Huskies team that I've been just so impressed with what Coach DeBoer has done with this program. I used to be so excited to watch Washington, especially when you're on the East Coast like me, late at night. With Jimmy Lake coaching, that offense was so boring to watch. Yes, they played good defense, but the offense was just so poor. And what he's been able to do in just a couple of months to turn this program and turn this offense around has been truly, truly impressive. One of the more impressive storylines we've seen. Before we get into the matchup again, I just want to say thank you guys for the support, whether you're a Huskies fan, whether you're a Ducks fan. We've been talking a lot about both teams. We really do appreciate it. And if you guys do like the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Let's get into the matchup. And quite frankly, in terms of matchups, I think the Huskies have a little bit better of a matchup. Am I saying they're going to win this game? Not necessarily. But what does Oregon struggle with the most on defense? They struggle with passing teams. They're allowing 65% completion percentage with over 270 yards per game given up through the air. Now, a lot of that has been kind of garbage time-esque as Oregon's been blowing out most of the teams. But Washington really can sling it around. And when you look at this Huskies offense, they can put you in a lot of binds. You look at some of the playmakers that they have. Rome Odunze, I don't think I said his name right. He's been absolutely phenomenal. McMillan's been very good. Jalen Polk's been very good. Even a guy like Giles Jackson. There's so many ways that this team can hurt you. And when Washington needed a play against a very good Oregon State team Friday night, Giles Jackson was the one making the play. This Washington Huskies team is going to spread you out, and they're going to force you to cover a lot of dynamic playmakers in space. Now, Oregon has some guys that I think this secondary is getting better. It was kind of really weak, especially against Georgia in some of the earlier games. But this team in this secondary was young, and they're getting better. Guys like Christian Gonzalez, guys like Bridges, they're starting to put it together. They're starting to force some turnovers. And I'm really excited to see what this Oregon secondary looks like. And especially when you're talking about college football playoff potential, Oregon needs to have some style points because the committee and the media, they're not going to forget what happened week 1 against Georgia. If you want to convince the committee that you're a different team and that you deserve to be in that top 4, you need to win, and you need to win in convincing fashion. They are 12.5-point favorites at home against Washington. And you know Dan Lanning and the Ducks are going to want to win this game and win it big and hopefully cover the spread. Now, you flip the side and you look at this Oregon team. Washington's been really, really good against the run. I've been very, very impressed in their front seven. You look at what they've been doing to opposing running backs and ball carries, only allowing 3.5 yards per carry to opposing ball carriers. And you look at some of the guys, Cam Bright has been absolutely phenomenal. I'm going to you look at some of the guys, Braylon Trice, I think, has been phenomenal up front. ZTF obviously has been a playmaker. They have a lot of guys who are very, very good and physical up front. And this is the best Oregon offensive line we see. I think Oregon is the best offensive line we see in the Pac-12. They're going up against, quite honestly, might be one of the best front sevens you see in the Pac-12. And what does Oregon want to do? They want to run the football. That is how their offense gets going. They're averaging almost 231 yards per game. Once they establish the run, that's when they hit those big explosive plays with Bo Nix. And you look at this Oregon rushing attack, yes, it's behind an offensive line that is very, very dominant. And it's experienced and it's good. And you pair that up with guys who are very, very capable ball carriers. I don't know if there's another team in the country where their 3 leading carriers are all averaging over 6 yards per carry. Bucky Irving averaging 6.9 yards per carry. Bo Nix has been very good, averaging 6.6 yards per carry. Noah Whittington. Guys you don't want to see in space are getting in space. That offensive line does a phenomenal job working up to linebackers and getting those running backs in one-on-one matchups with guys at the next level, and they're going to make you miss. That's probably Washington's biggest challenge, is to stop that run game, because when you have to put more bodies in the box, that's when Oregon gets that play action, and Bo Nix has been phenomenal throwing the deep ball. to guys like Troy Franklin. I've been a Bo Nix believer. And Oregon fans, you remember his first start as a true freshman against Auburn came against Oregon. He figures out he's a gamer. That being said, at Auburn, they did not run a very explosive offense. They had a very bad offensive line, and they didn't have a lot of playmakers. He comes to Oregon. You have one of the best offensive lines, not in the Pac-12, but in the whole entire country. You have a very good run game, and you have some guys that if you get the ball into their hands on the outside, they're going to make people miss, and they're going to hit explosive plays. This is the first year we've really seen Bo Nix have significant help around him. And I don't think it's a coincidence that you're seeing Bo Nix put together one of the best, easily the best season he's had in his career. You look at his stats, throwing for nearly 2,500 yards, completing almost 74% of his balls for 22 touchdowns and only 5 interceptions. The big bugaboo was Bo Nix in the turnovers. It reared its ugly head against Georgia. Since then, he's been absolutely dominant. There's a reason he's a top 5 guy in the Heisman. And then you look at a team that, what are the one-loss teams that can get into the college football playoffs? Oregon has to be on top of the list. They are starting to rack up some really, really impressive wins. And when your only loss is week 1 in Atlanta against a Georgia Bulldogs team that seems to be easily the best team in the country, Oregon is starting to put together a very strong case for them to get into the college football playoffs. And again, they need to run the table. There's no question about that. But they have guys, you look at their schedule, and they certainly are a team that can make some noise and pick up some really big wins. I think they're going to be favored in every single game. You play Washington, you play Utah, you play Oregon State. All of these teams are top 25 teams, probably Washington replacing Oregon State in the top 25. That'll come out on Tuesday. They have an opportunity to build this resume and then ideally play USC in the Pac-12 championship game. And if you do that and you win the table, you are sitting in the top 6 and have a very strong argument. You probably need some help, but you have a very strong argument if you're an Oregon Ducks fan to get into the college football playoffs. And I don't think there's a lot of people in the country that would say, I don't want to see another rematch between Georgia and Oregon in a 1-4 game, because Oregon has looked to be one of the best teams and the hottest team in the country as of the last couple weeks. Now, getting to the pick, Oregon 12.5-point favorites. We've been making a lot of money. They've been 7-2 against the spread ever since that loss against Georgia. They've covered every single spread besides Washington State, where that was they dominated the game. They just couldn't cover the points on the road. Oregon's been very good against the spread. But that being said, I've been very confident in Oregon to cover in a lot of games. We've picked them in a lot of games. This isn't a game that I'm extremely confident in. It opened up at 14. If it gets inside of 10, I start to feel a little bit better, but 2 touchdowns almost. I think Washington's going to be able to put up some points against this Oregon team, and I think they might be able to stop the run game a little bit. Am I saying Washington is going to win this game? No, but I do think Washington and their strengths match up very well against what Oregon does not do so well. There's not a lot of things Oregon does not do very well. Secondary, probably their weakest part of their defense. And then Washington, they've been very good against the run. Now, I think the key to this game is getting some heat on Michael Penix. When he's been hot, they haven't been great. And Oregon's starting to kind of get it going with that front seven. Obviously, guys like Noah Sewell blitzing from the linebacker spot, very good. But you take a look at guys like DJ Johnson, who's been very disruptive. Brandon Delores, he's also been very disruptive. If they can get some heat on Michael Penix, force him into some mistakes, force him to be hot a little bit, I think that's how Oregon can kind of win this game and cover the 12.5 points. That being said, if Washington holds up front, you give Michael Penix some time, he's got enough weapons to move the ball against a very good Oregon defense. If Oregon can't run the ball as effectively as they have against all the other teams that they've played, you might see them struggle a little bit on offense. I'm picking Oregon to win this game. I just don't know if I'm going to lay 12.5 points because this Washington team does match up very, very well. I'm not betting on Washington by any means, but I'm definitely not as confident as I've been. And I think Vegas is starting to catch up again to how good Oregon is. We saw some really, really low spreads earlier in the year after that loss to Georgia. This Oregon team is legit. I think Vegas has kind of caught up to how good this Oregon team is. I think this line is pretty right. I don't feel great about it. I might bet on it just because it's going to be a phenomenal game, but I don't love Oregon with all those points just because this Washington team can move the football. They can put some points on the board. This is going to be a very good one. This slate in general, Texas, TCU, also going to be on at this time. I'm going to have a lot of monitors. My brain's going to be going. This is going to be a very good one that I will certainly have eyeballs on. Again, appreciate all the support you guys have shown. Again, if you like the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We really do appreciate all the support, and we'll talk to y'all later.